Wanaka. Hi everyone, welcome to Clarkie's Corner, a special quarter-final edition, and congratulations to the Swire Shipping Fiji and Drua for reaching the playoffs in the Shop and Save Super Rugby Pacific in just their second season. A wonderful feat, and we'll have more on that shortly. And then there were 8. The quarterfinalists have been decided, and joining me to reflect on the regular season and to look ahead to this weekend's knockout matches, top Kiwi commentator and good bloke all round, Tony Johnson. Well, TJ, how are you?
Wanaka, Clarkie, Bula Wanaka. Thanks for having me.
How many years have you been calling Super Rugby playoffs now? It's been a while.
Well, if you include radio years, I've been there every year, going right back to 1996 when it started. But I did my first in Brisbane in 1996 when, in fact, I tell a lie, 1999. It was when the Crusaders went over there and beat the Reds, who'd been top qualifiers. So, no, it's been a long time, but you get to this time of year and I still feel the same level of excitement and anticipation about it. And I imagine that in Fiji right now, that's been heightened by the wonderful performance of the Fijian Drua and making the top 8. It's brilliant. Great effort.
More on the quarters shortly, TJ. Obviously, everyone in Fiji is delighted that the Drua have made the top 8. A lot of people who didn't agree with the Drua Moana being added to Super Rugby Pacific have now changed their minds. Were you always in favour of including the Pacific teams? I'm putting you on the spot here.
Yeah, well, right from the word go, actually, because I was at Ellis Park in Johannesburg when they announced Super Rugby back in 1995, just before the World Cup final. And I remember probably the first question I asked Richie Guy, the New Zealand chairman, they've done a great job stitching together this very bold new professional competition. But I said, what happens to the Pacific Islands? Because we'd seen the rise of Samoa in the last few years. Fiji, of course, always been a great fixture on the rugby circuit. And I said, what happens to them? And there was a bit of head scratching and they just weren't part of the picture. I thought that was sad. And in the end, it became a bit of a joke. I mean, we had Super 15 at one stage, 6 South African teams, which was preposterous. And it diluted the standard, but still no team from the Pacific Islands. So I've always been in favour of it. I've made it, I sort of said a few years ago that they cannot, in any conscience, add any more teams to this competition without bringing in teams from the Pacific. And so it's happened. Those of us who supported it definitely feel vindicated, particularly when you see what the Drua have achieved this year. So it's great. And, the important thing is that there's a level of support for the Drua. There's success. They have made the playoffs and they have bought in. I think I might have said it when I called the first game of the year, the Moana Pacifica Fijian Drua game at Mount Smart. I said this was what was missing. This is the ingredient that was missing from Super Rugby. So I'm so glad it's there now.
And you must have seen many players of Pacifica Heritage who have arrived in New Zealand to try their luck at rugby. I've seen plenty arrive in Australia. Some obviously become household names, haven't they?
Yeah, look, it's always a tricky subject of this. It's a bit of a chicken egg. Do they come for the rugby? Do they come for the education, the lifestyle? I think for a long time it was, people there was a migration towards New Zealand. New Zealand definitely benefited from that. And of course, in more recent years, the schools have been very active in getting players from Samoa, from Fiji, from Tonga to come to New Zealand on educational scholarships, but are all really about playing rugby. The flip side of that is that a lot of the players have come to New Zealand. They have been part of the school system, part of the rep program, the coaching resources, etc. And they go on to become international players for the country of birth. So I think big benefits for both sides. But to me, it's just so important that the last thing we wanted was for the Pacific Island nations to be just a breeding ground for other countries. And it's not just New Zealand and Australia. You see players of Pacifica origins turning up in the teams in the UK, the Tuilangis, for example, playing in England, the Vunipolas, etc. Tuipulotu playing for Scotland. And to me, having these teams in Super Rugby is a vital part of keeping those players connected with the country that they love, their home country. And ensuring that the majority of those players do play for Fiji or for Samoa or Tonga.
Okay, we could go on forever with this one, I know, but the best Fijians you've seen on the rugby field, and I've just got a little list here that I'm going to throw at you: Vau, Bandiri, Rokopoko, Sivivatu, Satutu, Wanabaka. I think even Walter Little obviously has a Fijian connection as well.
Yeah. Well, I still think that Rupini Thautau is the most remarkable player that I've ever seen. Christian Cullen is an All Black. I don't think we've ever had an attacking player of that sort of sheer brilliance. But to me, it's a little bit of a sad story with Rupini, because I don't think that he was able to have, showcase his incredible talent over as long a period as it should have. And there are a number of factors in that. But at his peak, and particularly back in 2002, 2003, when he was playing for the Blues, I've never seen anything like it before or since. So he remains, I think, the most remarkable rugby player in terms of just sheer attacking brilliance that I have ever seen. And, as I say, it's a story that's got some sad parts to it, but there have been others as well. You mentioned Joe Elevanderi was a great favourite of mine, a fellow I got to know very well over the years, just lovable fellow. And they touch you in a way, and Joe Rocks was similar. They touch you in a way that's not just about their rugby. It's that beautiful personality that they have. But, yeah, there's so many. And look, mate, I look at this team and I see the potential for some players to come through and be like that.
Indeed. Now, the All Blacks, they're talking about playing Fiji in Fiji next year. That's just going to be sensational if it happens.
Well, I hope it does happen. I mean, it simply just does not happen enough. And I think it's very much a blight. They'll come up with all sorts of reasons, none of which are particularly convincing. We did see before the World Cup was a few years ago when New Zealand went to Samoa. That was a great thing. It was a great day. New Zealand owes it to Fiji, I think, to play a game there. I presume it would be in Suva. It used to happen that when the All Blacks toured Australia, they would go to Fiji probably on the way home and play a game there. And sometimes they were very lucky not to get tipped up, because it was one of those things, and you'll remember from back in the days of the league, Clarkie, when the teams touring New Zealand, they'd play the test series and they'd have to play Auckland on the Tuesday night after the last test, and often got tipped up. That was what the Fiji game was like for the All Blacks. So it's overdue. To me, there's no more excuses for it not happening. And next year, well, it'd be as good as any, wouldn't it?
Indeed. What about the Drua then, Tony? They were too good for the Reds in Suva last weekend. The Drua ended the regular season with 5 wins from 6 home games. They proved they can also play in the wet and slippery conditions, not just the heat. I know the Reds were praying for rain, but they forgot about the fact that the majority of the Fijians grow up on the Suva side. That's where a lot of the rugby schools are. They play from, when they're knee-high to a grasshopper in mud and rain.
Yeah. It's a bit of a misconception, isn't it? And I saw the weather conditions. I thought, well, that's going to probably, if anything, favour the home team. Look, it's exactly what it should be. The game in Fiji, any game in Fiji, it should be tough. The thing is, since South Africa have gone, they've taken out that element of playing in different kind of conditions that I think was so important for Super Rugby. And so to me, that's what another of the things that Fiji brings is that, yes, the weather, the climatic conditions are different. You're playing in front of these boisterous, happy crowds that make so much noise. It's a great challenge, and it has proven too much, not just the Reds. A couple of very good New Zealand teams have gone up there and come second as well. And so I think that's great. And, in terms of Moana Pacifica, we just hope that maybe that, they don't quite have the infrastructural things in place that Fiji does to enable more games to be played in, say, Apia or Nuku'alofa. We just got to hope that happens in the future, because you don't really want those teams playing the majority of their home games outside of their own country. So, yeah, look, that result did not surprise me at all. And as I say, it's a thrill to see them into the top 8.
It's amazing to think that both the Western Force and the Melbourne Rebels have never made the playoffs in the full Super Rugby competition. Forget about during the pandemic where there was Super Rugby AU, 5 teams, etc. The Drua, they've done it in just their second year. It's quite incredible, isn't it?
It is. I think being able to play those 6 games at home has been a huge factor in that, and so that's risk and reward, because obviously there's a degree of investment required It's an expensive business putting on a Super Rugby game when you've got to think about the TV coverage. There's a certain standard of facility that's required, but they took the risk and they've got the reward. And I suppose that the next challenge will be, and we're going to sort of see a bit more of that this week, but to win more games away from home, not just the ones in Fiji. But I don't see any reason why, as this team grows, and I think that's the really brilliant thing about it, is that this team is actually is really growing in so many ways in terms of its confidence, just the experience. The fact that they've really engaged with the crowds, particularly their home crowds. Hopefully it'll just go from strength to strength.
Drua head coach Mick Byrne couldn't get a head coach's job in his native Australia. I know he got in touch with the Waratahs, and
I think there was a concern for him that he would be pigeonholed as a skills coach, because that's really where he made his name initially. He was a fantastic skills coach with the All Blacks, but he felt that he'd learned enough in that time that he wanted to branch out. He became more involved in the aerial stuff, the techniques of the forwards, line outs, backs under the high ball, all that sort of stuff. And then there was maybe a fear that he would be pigeonholed as an assistant coach, and he's proven everyone that he has the capabilities. To be a head coach, and what you love about Mick is he's one of those guys who very rarely shows his emotions, negatively, positively. He just keeps a very even exterior about him. That's very much in his keeping. He's a pretty laid back bloke. There are a few better guys to sit down and have a chat with for half an hour than Mick Byrne. So on a personal level, absolutely thrilled to see him doing well. But it just proved that the investment again in him that the Fijian Drua have made has paid off.
He's doing it a bit tough away from rugby at the moment, and we're going to talk about that later in the podcast. But who has impressed you from the Drua? Senator Yosef Marcy has really impressed me. The stats don't lie: 9 tries, so many defenders beaten, etc., etc. But some players have put their hands up for the Rugby World Cup this year for the Flying Fijians.
Yeah, which is exactly what you want. It's funny. You like it when players make you seem like a genius, because I remember the first game of the year, that game at Mount Smart, and the player that we highlighted, I asked to highlight at the start of the game was Marcy. To me, just what I'd seen of him, the little glimpses that I'd seen of him, I thought this guy is class, and he has absolutely shown it. To me, I think he has the potential to become a superstar of Fiji rugby. But there are others. And you have to talk about Ravovo, the guy inside him, Kalaveti Ravovo. It's a shame that he's going. He's provided so much thrust that just opens up, creates opportunities for Marcy to finish off. Lamani, obviously, Frank Lamani, such an experienced player now. He's taken on that role of being the general. So you got to give credit to him. Tamani, I think, out of the loose forwards, again, is just shown to be such a quality player. But also, Ikanaveri, the hooker, just leads from the front. There are some great hookers going around. It's become quite a high-profile position hooker. You think back in the days of the Tani Nortons and what have you, they just bury themselves in the tight, and their job was to hook the ball in scrums and maybe throw the ball into the line out. Not now. The hooker has become an attacking weapon, and we've got so many great ones. Likes of Dane Coles, I guess, kind of almost changed the role to a degree, and I think he's the guy he got incredible speed for a bloke in his position, and I saw that we saw that in the first game at Mount Smart, where he just gassed. I think it was Levi Almore on the outside. I was like, you don't see that happen. And so, to me, he has been a standout as well. But no, I agree with you. I think Marcy, to me, has been the great discovery and one of the top sort of new players to come into Super Rugby this year out of any team.
All the talk after the win over the Reds in Suva last week was all about the improvement, and it's pretty obvious. Last year, the Drua scored 30 tries. This year, they've scored 54 already. They won 2 games last year. They've won 6 this year. A massive improvement, and people are rightly happy and proud about those stats.
Yeah, and again, I think the energy that they draw from those wonderful supporters, that's got to be a factor in it. Because it's a bit like the Brazilian football team when the samba drums start to beat, and you can just see the players start to almost play with the rhythm of the drum. It's the way that the crowd feeds off the team feeds off the crowd, whichever it is. It's a wonderful positive energy. So I think that has to be a factor. But again, it's not just about that. It's about the growth of the team, and I think the confidence. And this is another area where you've got to give Mick some credit, because a lot of coaches, they come in and they take over a team and they want to impose rigid structures. Now, absolutely, you've got to have some structure to your play. You've got to have a good set piece. You haven't got a set piece, you can't play. No ball, no play. But Mick is he's found the balance there. That, yeah, the set piece, they do well. They can also just their setups. You have to have a certain number of players carrying the ball up to create the opportunities. But from there on, you're a Fiji team, play Fiji rugby, and that's what they do. Which is why you get these amazing sort of end-to-end tries with the beautiful handling skills and the offloads and the pop balls into space for someone to run onto. It's the classic Fiji style, and so credit to Mick and his coaching staff, but also the senior players, the leaders of the team, for being able to strike that balance. But never stop being a Fiji rugby team.
Long may it continue. And of course, everyone at Fiji, they think there's only one team at Super Rugby Pacific, the Drua, but we better talk about some others. What about the Reds? Now, since their gutsy win over the Chiefs a month ago in New Plymouth, and it wasn't the A team for the Chiefs, but we saw what the non-A team did in Perth last week to the Force. But the Reds have now lost 3 on the trot to the Blues, Highlanders and Drua. Not the sort of form you want to take into the playoffs. And there's been a bit of talk about, do we have to have 8 teams?
Well, I like playoffs? 8 teams. I like 8 teams in the competition. I was watching just the other day the program that they do on Stan, the rugby show over there, and they were debating that as well. And someone saying, "Oh, we should only have 6 teams," and it was Justin Harrison who said, "No, 8's good, because you got 8. You have the story that we've had over the last few weeks, where we've had 4, maybe 5 teams competing for those last 2 spots in the playoffs. Fiji and Drua being one of them. That becomes a story in itself. That becomes a focal point. Is that it's not just about who's finishing 1, 2, 3, 4. There's a hell of a battle going on for 7 and 8. So that's the upside of having 8. Yes, it does look a bit lopsided when you've got only 4 teams missing, 8 teams make it through. But we're still going to have 4 good contests this week, and had that really good battle to get those positions on the table and fighting out those last 2 spots. I talk about 6, where maybe the first 2 teams get a week while others sort out who would play them in a semi-final. Maybe, but to me, broken and doesn't need fixing.
And of course, television pays a lot of money for content, and they want a lot of content. And 8 teams in a
people who complain about night rugby. Well, I can remember the days when I was screaming out for night rugby. So you can't have it both. Well, at the moment, I think 8 is justified, to
lose last weekend. The Waratahs, Rebels, and Force also lost. Should Eddie Jones be?
It's probably even better than I do, and I can't see Eddie Jones worrying about Australian rugby. Is that no matter what's going on, aren't playing that well, or someone gets injured away, their ability to put the team on the field for a test match, you'd never question that. And he's the supreme strategist. He'll be sitting there, he'll be working out all sorts of plans, most of which will probably involve the unstitching of the All Blacks. Done that. Look, there are a few things, the injuries are a bit of for the Australian teams. I mean, we've had them here in New Zealand as well, but they've had some devastating, losing, for example, that's a massive blow for the Reds, others as well. And, he's got some grey area, be prepared to take a few risks. Look, it's going to be fascinating the coming weeks. We've got the Rugby Championship coming up. It's going to give us a nice little pointer as way these teams are heading. But as I say, I would never, ever underestimate the ability of Eddie Jones to get together.
Out, aren't we, over the coming months? Week 15 results in Super Rugby Pacific. Blues 16-9 over the Highlanders, 7-26. Moana broke their drought and finally won one down in the Waratahs, 33-24. And as I mentioned before, pretty much a second outclassed the Force by 43-19. Out for you.
Taking their eye off the ball, with the Waratahs thinking a week ahead. That was a pretty dismal effort, although give some credit to the Moana Pacifica. So I think they've led games try that they conceded against the Blues. So for Aaron team, I'm disappointed that Aaron Major's calling it a day. Great to see them finish the season with a win. I would have hated for them to go through without a win. Other but it was a poor match, and again maybe that was just a case of one team dragging another team down to a different kind of level. But it was a little bit disappointing, that one. But I think we can put all that behind us now. We can look ahead. Some teams will be hoping that that's not important of things to come, hoping that the old, not a great dress rehearsal, good performance when it really matters comes into play, because a couple of those teams that got beaten last week, they wouldn't be very happy with their form at all.
Well, our time, the top 8 quarterfinals, 4 Kiwi teams and the Brumbies make up the top 5. The quick fire here: Blues and Waratahs, Eden Park. The Waratahs final game on Eden Park, you would think.
I don't think things that he's achieved, and he is a great player. But all the things he's achieved in rugby, I don't think he's ever experienced a win there. Certainly not with the Brumbies, certainly not with the Waratahs, because he hadn't even started playing Super Rugby. Interestingly, hero of the night, he collected, I think, 3 people. Halanaku, who's now on the coaching staff of the Blues, a very much like figure here in Auckland. He is too. So they're up against injury problems have struck them. And he's the sort of guy who can just score a try out of nothing and turn a match. We've seen it before. So that's a big loss. Blues have lost Paddy Tuipulotu. Played out the game last week with a broken arm. And so he's out now. And so that leaves them a little bit thin, although James Tucker, I know, is well known to you. He comes and he never lets them down. A bit of a worry there, but they do get Bowden Barrett back from that gashed heel that he had that's kept him out for a couple of weeks. So I can't see the Waratahs breaking their duck at Eden Park, but the Blues would need to be a heck of a lot were last week just to make sure there's no upset.
Okay, yeah, you have to, I think, turn back at full strength up against the Reds, who, look, they dodged a bullet, and the Reds, I know, are just approaching this one to say, well, we're there, we beat the Chiefs, a few have a crack, and that's what the top 8 is all about, the quarterfinal.
Yeah, fun by surprise, are they? That would have stung the Chiefs. They were looking at an unbeaten season, potentially at that point. And they went over there, and sure, they weren't at strength, but they didn't play well. The Reds played really well. That was the Reds' performance of the season.
New Plymouth,
sorry, I beg your pardon. New Plymouth over there. What I meant was over there.
Down there.
Away from Hamilton. Go over. Sorry. And for some reason, Hamilton's not Taranaki, New Plymouth, it's not a happy hunting ground for the Chiefs. But yeah, they get back in front of a crowd. Look, I just, much as I've got a more than a soft spot, Brad Thorne and Kane Hames, 2 people that I have great regard for. It'd be nice for them. I just can't see it happening. To me, not just their attacking prowess.
No, I can't either. Well, that's rugby. Saturday, Crusaders and the Drua in Christchurch. Obviously, I've got a soft spot for. They celebrated last week for a while, but then they just thought, well, they jumped on the bus from Suva, headed straight back to Nandi. They wanted to sleep in their own beds. They wanted to be at headquarters on Sunday morning. They're going to get a full preparation as far as those key days of the Tuesday workout. rest day on Wednesday. So we're on a roll. Anything can happen.
Yeah, and I think that's what we've got to hope in terms of, you know, it being a good quarterfinal clash. Look, the Crusaders have got a few problems. They've got a few injuries. So David Havili, who's such an important member of their backline, he takes a lot of the heat off Richie Mo'unga. He's a secondary decision maker. He's a secondary playmaker. And he's gone, and they never seem to play quite so well when he's not there. Cullen Grace is another one who's gone. They've been through a few props. And in fact, to the point where they had to call up John Arfoa, who, believe it or not, has gone past. And I never thought this would happen. He has gone past Brad Thorne as the oldest player to play Super Rugby. So that's how tricky things have got for Scott Robertson's team. Don't have to be on their best behaviour if they want to win this game. I'd love to, just for the sake of it, I'd love to see the Drua get a good start in this game. You know, score a couple of early tries, because over the years in knockout games, those are the ones, and the Crusaders, of course, got such a great record. But, for example, when they've been beaten by the Hurricanes in a knockout, it always comes down to the start. So the Drua have to make a good start. If the Crusaders control the game, control the first quarter of the game, then I can only see one result. But if the Drua can make a good start, just shake things up a bit, well, then that opens up the possibilities. But, mate, you know, if you had a choice of where you were going to be the away team, you had a choice of where you were to play a knockout game in Super Rugby, I think Christchurch would probably much be the last place you'd want to go.
Righto. Well, we're looking forward to that one. And also the Brumbies and the Hurricanes in Canberra. Hurricanes don't have the best of records in Canberra, but, they're on a bit of a roll.
Yeah, they're a dangerous team, the Hurricanes. They were a little bit unlucky not to make the top four and get a home quarter final. The big question mark about them was that they banked a lot of points early on against perhaps not the strongest of opposition. Their record against the other New Zealand teams has been a little bit patchy, but they're dangerous. And to me, look, this probably is the contest of the weekend. If you look at it from just a purely, and so it should be, because they're the teams closest to each other on the table. That's that fourth against fifth scenario. Look, there's players in that Hurricanes team who just have the ability to inspire. And obviously, number one is Ardie Savea. He is a phenomenal player. Geordie Barrett, he'd want to find his kicking boots again. He hasn't been goal kicking all that well. But, you know, they've got players who can just do something a little bit out of the ordinary. They have won there in the past, but we all know that if Christchurch is the last place you'd want to play a knockout game, probably Canberra would be a reasonably close second. New Zealand teams have traditionally battled over the years when they go there. I guess a lot of it's going to come down to, can the Brumbies control the game? If the Brumbies are able to control the game, then they control where on the field it's being played. They're so good at it. We know that they've got a great driving maul, which the New Zealand teams, you know, they've learned to defend pretty well. But if you were to say that that's all they've got, that would be greatly wrong, because the Brumbies do have they have talent. They have tall. I think he's been one of the fastest wingers in the comp, wouldn't he? So yeah, they're more than just the set piece. But if you don't watch your discipline, and if you don't, you know, win your own ball and look after it, then it could be a long night. But I give the Hurricanes a chance. But I think they just have to start well.
Okay, and it's going to be interesting to see who comes through the fitness this week for the Brumbies as well. All right, who's your pick to go all the way? $6 million
I can't
question.
go. Look, at this stage, I can't go past the Chiefs. There's been a sense that maybe there's an inevitable Chiefs Crusaders final. I wouldn't go so far as to say that, because I think you know, there are other possibilities as well. But, you know, if it goes according to the form, that could happen. But to me, and look, going right back to the beginning of the season, we did some pre-season games. The thing about the Chiefs is that they've got great depth, that no matter who's injured, who's not available, apart from that game in New Plymouth where something went wrong, they've been able to cover it every week. And Super Rugby does become a bit of a battle of attrition. And it's, who's got the strongest squad standing. And if you look across all the squads now, to me, the Chiefs have got the most number of their key players still standing, the greatest number of first choice players still playing. And so, look, to me, that other team everyone's going to have to beat, but because we know the Crusaders, it's in their heritage that their record in Super Rugby is greatly superior to anyone else, and that's for a reason. But I think this might be one of those years, for the first time in quite a long time. I think their grip on it is under serious threat.
And the Crusaders, they've named their coach for the next couple of years, Rob Penny. Some people saying, well, he wasn't all that great with the Waratahs, probably didn't have the same cattle, of course, and hasn't had a lot of success in Japan. But, gee, I'll tell you what, he's Canterbury, he's Crusaders through and through.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, isn't it, Clarkie? Because you're right, but it wouldn't be the first time. Sometimes the chemistry is just not there. And he wouldn't be the only New Zealand coach who's gone to Australia and hasn't quite achieved what you thought might happen. But it's an interesting one because he was a successful coach of the Crusaders of Canterbury, but battled a wee bit, to get that job. He wanted the Crusaders job. He didn't get it in the first place, so he comes back, I suppose, with a bit of a point to prove. He's learned a lot over that time. So it's going to be interesting. But I suppose the thing about the Crusaders, it's not just about the players or the coach or whatever. It's about the environment that they've got there. And despite the fact that they're playing in a very dilapidated stadium, everything else about what they do is very, very impressive. And so the environment is there for Rod Penny to step back in with all the things that he's learned from things that have gone right, the things that haven't gone right for him, and carry on the great tradition of Crusader rugby.
And he's also bringing back Matt Todd as well, and we know how good he was as a player.
Yeah.
Now, Rugby World Cup is under 100 days away in France. Australia, Pool C with Fiji, Wales, Georgia, Portugal. The big question, can Fiji finish in the top two and progress? I think they can now that they've got this extra depth, and some of their big guns are firing in Europe as well. Wallabies will have players of Fijian heritage in their World Cup squad. You'd think it'd be Valetini, Gleeson, Karevi, Corumbeti, Vunivalu maybe, Dunguna maybe, Nwanganitawasi will be there. The All Blacks should have one or two players with Fijian heritage as well. If Super Rugby form is anything to go by, the All Blacks should be there at the business end of the World Cup again. Now, again, are you confident?
Well, I don't know about confident, Clarkie. I don't sort of look at it in those terms. I just try and take a dispassionate view from a professional side of things and just see, what I do see when I look at the World Cup is that the draw is just ridiculously lopsided when you've got probably the four top teams in the world all on one side of the draw. But that's good news for the teams that are on the other side of the draw. That really does enhance their prospects. And I definitely think that with the incredible talent at their disposal, that Fiji are absolutely capable of getting into the knockout phases. But yeah, look, from a New Zealand perspective, New Zealand's record, just in terms of their consistency at World Cups, their ability to finish in the top three teams, is rivaled only by South Africa. And I still think that they have got the capabilities as long as key players remain fit. And I think, that the locking combination of Whitelock and Retallick, that's going to be crucial to them, keeping those two fit. Ian Foster, in a way, he's got a bit of a point to prove. I almost feel a bit sorry for him because he's basically had the whole sort of limelight has been taken away and dominated by the whole Razor Robertson thing. And I don't think it's actually shone New Zealand rugby in a particularly good light, the way they've handled that whole situation. So Ian Foster, I think he's got a bit of a point to prove. I think he'll be pretty well driven, and so will Joe Schmidt. I'm not sure whether they're able to win it. To me, France have to be the favourites. but no one can dispute their ability to self-destruct. And Ireland have never gone past the quarterfinals. South Africa are always going to be strong. Look, it's wide open, even if it's lopsided. I still think New Zealand have got a team capable of going deep into the tournament. They've got a team that is capable of winning it, but they will not go in as favourites, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think they had their problems and they got through them. And I'll be very surprised if New Zealand are there at the business end. Now, on a sad note this week, everybody, our thoughts and prayers are with Drua head coach Mick Byrne and his family and friends after the passing of Mick's dad before last week's final game in Suva. And this week, Wayne Smith, not the Kiwi coaching guru who's just been knighted, but Wayne Smith, the veteran Aussie rugby writer who's covered the game for over 4 decades, passed away. And our thoughts and prayers are with Wayne's family and many, many friends. He was just a terrific bloke, a great tourist and a great writer. TJ, did you get to know Wayne?
Paths crossed, yes, definitely. Used to always have a chat. And that's one of the things I always, used to love about going over to, just gathering around in the, the press area before and talking to the likes of Spiro Zavos and yourself and other people, journalists. And Wayne Smith, he wrote for The Australian, didn't he? And they always, to me, came out with interesting storylines. I think that was one of his great assets, was his ability to come out with not just the usual, this coach said that said coach said that, and the war of words continues and all that bloody blah that you get before big games. He came out with really good storylines. So that's very sad loss. And also to Mick, losing his father, having lost my own dad late last year, I know how painful that is and what a massive gap it leaves in your life. So, all the aroha nui, as we say here in New Zealand, with the families of those two fine people.
Yeah, I managed to pass on my condolences to Mick personally last week, but from a Wayne Smith point of view, Wayne would call me up on a Monday and he'd say, Clarkie, I heard a stat during your commentary the other night. Are you absolutely certain about that? And I said, yeah, I think so. He said, well, listen, I'm double checking by calling you. So can you go off and double check that? I said, Wayne, I'm about to tee off. He said, I don't care. This is a story that has to be printed and I want to make sure that stat was right. So you'd make a few phone calls to the Fox Sports stats department and make sure it was all okay. But he was just a professional and he did that with a smile on his face. He was just a lovely bloke and he's going to be missed. Well, Tony Johnson, all the best for your commentary throughout the playoff series. We will be watching and you're doing the Blues and the Waratahs in the quarters.
Yes, I am. Yeah. And I'm looking forward to that. I always love this time of the competition where it suddenly becomes sudden death. Super Rugby every year goes through a little bit of a lull when, teams start having the bye or players have to be rested or whatever. But and people do sort of complain a little bit. You get to this sharp end of the season, though, it's always something to look forward to. So, absolute pleasure. Always great to catch up with you, mate. And let's just hope that we get some really great rugby action this weekend.
Tony Johnson, our special guest on Clarkie's Corner. Thanks again for your time. And, folks, we will leave it there for this week. Thanks for joining us. Best of luck, obviously, to the Drua in the playoffs. They're taking on the Crusaders on Saturday in Christchurch. I'm Greg Clark. Bye for now. Move.